Today we're talking about speed and performance, and we're going to be talking about how to optimize your site with regard to speed and performance to make it more competitive. And we're going to be looking at it both from a strategic angle and from a technical angle. So there'll be lots of strategy, lots of technical tips, and a lot to get you started along the path of understanding how to do it and why you should do it. And if you're doing it yourself, how to do it better. And if you've got somebody doing it for you, what you should be asking them to do or what you should be looking out for. So we'll be looking at how it affects SEO, what it does to it. And part of what we'll be doing is looking at how Google scrutinizes your website performance. So Google looks at your website, takes certain elements away from it, and that then is reflected in your rankings on the search pages, results pages. Also, we'll be looking, another objective will be to understand how you can improve your performance. And out of today, we hope that you will have some knowledge of how to carry out a basic performance assessment. And we'll go into some detail, but we'll give you both the way to do it and why you should do it and how to do it. Also, some technical approaches to help you boost your SEO at the same time. So you'll be getting all aspects of speed and performance and how to manage it. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague Ben, who is going to be talking about why is speed important.
That's Mark. Yes, so just to go over again quickly what Mark's pointed out there, we're reviewing how Google scrutinizes your website, understanding how to improve the performance, and you'll go away with some know-how on how to assess it. So this speed really constitutes the third pillar in our Pillars of SEO series of webinars, and it's the final one, but it also loops back around to the start because it's important, because it's the first thing you think about before even sharing your content, and but it relates as well in terms of the ongoing performance of your website. So why is it important for SEO? Well, improving your site speed is important for better search rankings. And in 2018, Google made it a direct ranking factor as part of its algorithm. So extremely important, and on equal par, I think, with what we've covered before in the way of keywords for content and backlinks, which really represent the ongoing strategy for seeking approval for your content online. We're going to go over some of the technical issues and, as Mark pointed out, an exercise in how to do an assessment of your current performance for any part of your content. But we'll try and make it nice and quick and snappy and get through to our Q&A. So do please contribute to the Q&A section of the site, which we'll introduce you to shortly.
Yeah, we'd welcome questions at the end, and but you can type them in now and at any time on the chat at the bottom. Q&A, sorry, at the bottom.
So page speed is the speed at which an individual page loads on your site. And when assessing the speed of your website or page, Google will give you two scores, one for the mobile version and one for the desktop version. But predominantly, Google focuses on the lowest common denominator when it's assessing these things. So half the world is on 3G still in the West. We obviously enjoy very high-speed internet and broadband, and that's getting quicker and quicker. But most of the world is still on 3G, is very slow, and up to 50% of search engine users now, probably more since 2018, are using mobile devices. So Google really is emulating the speeds and the connection speeds and the speed for mobile devices specifically. And as we know, on desktop, the score is generally higher because most people are connected using Ethernet. So that's why mobile is first, and mobile devices tend to have slower connections. We deal with mainly B2B customers, and they would probably argue that most of their traffic comes through a desktop because they do all their trading during working hours from an office. In most cases, though, obviously that's changing more and more, but it's incidental in a way because it's Google that's ranking for the mobile capabilities of your website. Even though user experience plays a big role in it, at Marcom we really take a mobile first approach on all our web design and our marketing and our content development. Because of this, so that your websites are better optimized and better performing.
Yeah, I think we work from worst case scenario, don't we? So even if only a small proportion of your clients and customers view your website on mobiles, if they're all doing it on their desktop, and that will vary from business to business, but even so, Google works from your mobile point of view because it is the slowest. And obviously, most people watching this will be at home now, where the likelihood is they'll have be sitting in front of a laptop of some sort. But the other likelihood is that the internet speed will be slower at home than it will be in their office. So Google takes this into account.
Yes, and Google will also serve up different results in the search engines for mobile devices, where it might lean on localization factors if you're out and about using mobile data. And Gil will probably be able to fill us in a bit shortly on how that comes into play as well for actual SEO. Needless to say, it's an important factor, and we'll talk a bit later about the benefits design-wise of having a fully responsive website versus a secondary mobile representation of your website. But both have pros and cons. And speed is relative. It depends on lots of different factors. We'll talk about this a bit more in a second, but what we really have control over is our server response time, so our web services and our website. Everything else really comes down to outside factors outside of our control. So we are really looking at mitigating the outside factors and optimizing on the internal factors.
And one more thing just to say on that, I believe that many people spend a lot of time to increase their SEO performance, to increase their ranking by working on keywords and writing content and optimizing their website. However, I do believe that in very simple steps, by speaking to a developer or doing it yourself, by increasing the speed of your website, you can really increase your ranking even overnight. So as soon as Google sees that your website's gone fast, it would rank it higher than potential competitors that might rank high now because of their speed rather than the opposite. So yeah, very important to work on it, and you can get credit points to your ranking very easily.
Mm. Yeah, and the converse is true, is that if you don't work on it and it is very slow, all that hard work you're doing on the content will be to no avail at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and to add to that, now Google has to make a lot of difficult choices when it comes to separating highly contested keywords and content. People spend a lot of money on their advertising to promote their content. So how does Google go about sifting the good from the bad? And speed really, that's where speed really comes into play. It really does separate the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's if you have two highly optimized websites, well designed, responsive, both paying handsomely for the same keyword terms, how does Google decide who comes first? If not, based on an aggregated time of speed, aggregated speed over time. So it helps them in that respect. So Google search engines penalize sites that perform poorly. More importantly, users do too, because of a diminished user experience. And that's what we're alluding to here is that speed is measured in seconds, not points. Now, we're going to take you through a site assessment using an audit shortly that hopefully you'll be able to feed back to us on some of the results later down the line. But and that focuses on really a score from 0 to 100, but that score varies quite a lot dynamically, especially when it comes to talking about speed performance. So we're really looking at the improvements that can be made to speed and should be made. Like Mark said and Gil alluded to, if you're not doing this, then you're missing out, basically, because you can guarantee that a competitor is doing it better, and they're effectively taking the desired spots in the search engines. But also, we're going to talk about how we shouldn't be compromising quality of content over purely chasing these sort of arbitrary scores. But poor page speeds can affect rankings indirectly by increasing the bounce rate and reducing dwell time. Now, those are important factors from Google's perspective, and go back again to diminished user experience. If your web page is just taking too long, however fantastic the content might be, when they get there, users generally leave sites that take longer than, say, 3 seconds to load, and that's by Google's own assessment. So we're really trying to look at reducing the impact on user experience as well.
Yeah, and you'll know this from your own browsing experience. If it's slow to load, you get fed up and go off and look at somebody else's site.
Yeah, and what I agree is really you wouldn't think so, but lots of research has been done. And from 2 seconds, people start to leave the page, and 3 seconds is kind of the top range that you'd want to get your website to load until. Anything slower than 3 seconds would just get people out of the page very quickly.
And it's a pressure point, because bounce rate is actually recorded at the second, third page beyond. In terms of a visit, when a user comes and starts a session on your website, it's an accumulative effect in terms of the diminished user experience. They'll allow your homepage to load first time and wait and see what they're presented with. But if their experience throughout browsing the rest of your site becomes worse and worse and worse because of the poor page load time, then that really is where you get hurt by the bounce rate increasing. So a good website in Google's eyes should load in about 3 seconds, and a really, really fast one should load in about 1. So that's the Goldilocks zone that we're talking about. 3 is the magic number. Everything happens in Google's assessment in 3 seconds, and there's quite a lot that goes on there in their assessment. So we'll pick through that a little bit shortly, but that's really what most websites should be aiming for. And we'll see that there's a lot that you should be doing to try and get there. And as I said, it's a consideration both after the effect, once you've launched the website, working on a new one. And it's important to think about these things with your developer before you launch a new website. Page speed is not site speed, where Google might assess a set of pages, a set of content, or a whole category of content. So understanding the factors of website speed is more important for improvement overall than obsessing over page speed score. And that goes back to the title again, which is it's important that we know the factors for improvement. We know the way to get there. We focus on them. We test continually. We maintain and monitor our websites properly, rather than simply deliberating over a score which can change quite dynamically. You might ask, therefore, what's the point of an assessment and audit if the scores are going to come out differently every time? Well, again, we'll go into how you can use other tools to try and get cross-comparison. But what you're really looking for is the feedback and the instructions on how you can improve your website. That's the most important thing. And then reassessing over time. So, Gil, you'll want to chime in on this, but quality should not be compromised in terms of SEO. The fact is, some of your websites are going to simply load more, take more time to load than others, because you'll be populating them with lovely images and videos and things that just take a long time to load. So, your content is the most important thing. It's the key thing. What we're really talking about here in terms of performance and speed is just what should be done as a matter of course to support that effort. And it's a lot of effort and it's a lot of time and investment that goes into generating good content.
Yeah, I agree. So I believe that speed is a priority. And as Ben said, content should not be compromised. You need to make an informed decision, knowing your own website and your own content and your own visitors. What are they after? If you are a graphic designer and you're all about the colors and the shapes and the design, or if you're a video editor and you'd like to put a lot of videos on your website, then you would expect, and even the user would expect, that you will take longer for the website to load. Therefore, maybe 3 seconds might be extended to 5 seconds. However, if you are just there to deliver very kind of factual information, you really need to focus on the speed. As the packaging, as much as it's important, you want the visitors to read it. So it's a fine balance between making your website the most beautiful and with using the most graphics versus how long the users are going to wait to see it.
Okay, Gil, maybe you want to introduce everyone to a few tools.
Yeah, so we were going to share with you some practical tools of how you'll be able to assess your websites by yourself. And that's important first because you would know what's your current situation, but then also second, that you'll be able to check for improvement later on. Later on, we will be showing you how to use one of these tools, but it's very important to go through these tests. So if you were to go to your developer or do some improvement and optimization by yourself, you'll be able to measure your success. So there's a few tools that have been produced by Google. One of them is PageSpeed, is the more traditional tool that been used by developers and website owners for a long time. It gives quite a lot of information about your site and will give you, and it's worth having a look. Second one is the Google Lighthouse, which we are going to demonstrate very soon. So on the next slide. And then there are other tools that are inspiring to give more information that Google gives, because obviously Google don't want to give you all the information just to encourage competition. There are other tools that you can use, such as GT Metrics, which is a very useful tool, and most developers use that to scan through your website and check different ratings and different speeds. So it's very important, as the note at the bottom says, to have a general analysis of your website coming from different sources. So from Google-based sources, but also from alternatives, and finding out what's the points that you're failing on and why your website is slow, not just by one source, but also by multiple sources. And then later on, you'll be able to compare your improvement versus your initial findings.
Yes, and as Gil says there, what these tools really are doing is trying to emulate different scenarios to test your content within. So Pingdom, for instance, will do an emulation where it will test from different locations, different server locations, and give you a picture, that includes different countries, give you a picture of how your website is performing there as well. So really, really good tools out there to use to make that assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Think is only a mobile-only, quite a simple, straightforward analysis tool that would help you understand why your website is slow. So it's less for developers, it's more for people that don't really understand all the specifics. Although Ben, later on, we're going to explain some more specifics about Google page speeds, and so you'll be able to kind of speak to your developers about that.
Yes, we're going to now try something a bit technical. I'm going to hand over to Gil to run a live audit on Google's homepage itself and help you guys to understand how you can do your own assessment of your content, your pages. Gil's just taken us now over to Google, and talk us through, Gil, what you're doing here. So we've opened an incognito page in the browser, haven't we? And why have we done that?
Yeah, so in your browser, on a normal browser, when you open it regularly to look around the web, there'll be a lot of extensions and information that is already saved within your browser, like cookies and cache from websites that you visited before. So the reason we use Incognito to do page speed tests is to clear out all those information, all that data that would potentially obscure the results of your page speed. So if you don't know how to use Incognito, it's very simple to just have a quick Google Incognito mode or in different browsers. And secondly, we do recommend using Chrome for these tests. We are now going to do the demonstration using Google Chrome, which is a browser like Internet Explorer or so.
Chrome, so just to got in there, Gil, Chrome has got built-in tools that we've been talking about so far, Lighthouse. As you say, Gil, Incognito mode within Google Chrome will give you the sort of cleanest connection. You can just go to new tab or new window and open Incognito mode. So that's what we've done here to get this clean connection before we show you how to access the tool and run an assessment. And you can do this on any web page, can't you? You can do it on your latest blog post. You can do it on the homepage of your website. So they've built in this auditing tool now called Lighthouse. It incorporates page speed insights. And they've incorporated that into the browser.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, okay, so let's just crack on and see how it works. So you'd open a page on Incognito, as we say, using Chrome. Anywhere on the page, you can right click, and then inspect. This is the inspect tool that will come up. It's a developer tool that Chrome has developed. You'll see on the top sections, there's an area, there's a tab called Audits. And then you'll see the different options you can select in order to generate a report. You will be able to choose between a report based on mobile speed and performance versus desktop. So we will run a mobile one, but when you were to do your test, I recommend running one from each. And then you just click here, generate report. It'll take a couple of seconds for this report to come up. Google analyze the page you're on, finding out all the information, checks the speeds, and then very shortly will come up with the results. So we're going to check Google itself and check how fast they are.
Well, they should be good because they are the experts, aren't they?
Yeah, obviously they weren't cheating. Otherwise, it will only all be green here.
So yeah, generally speaking, the performance section there, which is what we're talking about in terms of speed, now that will be the most sort of variable factor. As we've already established, connection speeds differ. If your web page is calling on content from different parts of the internet, then that will affect the connection speed. So you'll see that vary, but you can get a baseline using different tools. So what we're seeing here in the overview really is represents really the pillars of SEO that we've been talking about. So SEO itself is the content, how well optimized the content is. As you'd expect with Google, it's very high, as is the best practice, which really reflects the build quality, the code quality, and capability of the code. Accessibility is much more about sort of screen reading, how well optimized the page is for different types of users, users with impaired sight or whatever there might be for different types of users. Google ranks your page highly for better accessible content. And then performance is going through some of our speed tests. And below here, we're going to go back to the presentation in a minute and break this down a bit more for you to establish exactly what's happening within that first 3-second analysis or the assessment that Google is making. But below here, you'll get this full audit of all the various elements of the page that Google has assessed, and a deeper summary, a deeper insight into the different elements as to explanation as to what Google's testing there. If we go a bit further down the page, we'll actually see how Google has measured everything. And these drop-down boxes, these expandable boxes, will give you or your developer a precise readout of why that particular element has not performed well. If we look at that one there, yeah. So gives you considerations and gives you advice on that. Some of which you'll need some help deciphering, but some are very straightforward and understandable. So I'll give you some ideas of what to ask your developer and ask your agency. So we'd encourage you to do this test for yourself after the presentation. Go away and have a go at this. Maybe it's your latest blog post, maybe it's your homepage. I'd be really interested to hear about the results, and obviously happy to talk to you about that.
I guarantee that you will be shocked unless you're using a very clever SEO agency like Marcom.
Yes, indeed. So, Gil, can you hand back to me, or I'll take over now?
Yeah, let's pass it on to you.
Thanks. That's great. So I'll share my screen. There we go. That's where we were. So there's our assessment, Lighthouse Audit, Google Chrome, using PageSpeed Insights. Very useful to know. And I'm just going to break that down a little bit for you. You might want to reference this later on. Just to reiterate, with all of our webinars, they'll be available to you on our website along with the video of this, but also the PDF of the presentation as a resource with the links in, so you can use that, download that and use that. All for free. It's been great, actually. We're getting lots of great feedback from everyone about this series of webinars, so much that we're going to carry on doing this in May, and it's nice to start building an audience around what we're doing here, and everyone seems to be getting a lot from it, so really keen to get your feedback. Right now we're going to break this down a bit, and as I said, you might want to do a side-by-side comparison with the audit. What's Google looking for within that audit, within that, ideally that first 3 seconds of an assessment? So the first contentful paint, what does it mean when the user sees something on your page for the first time? So that could be anything really. That could be the outline of text box, first few words of the paragraph. As soon as anything is drawn on the page, that's the first thing that Google will recognize as something's happening. This is all in chronological order. The next thing is when first meaningful paint is when the user can actually understand the first piece of content. So the first word or whatever is legible in Google's eyes as far as a human user. So we're talking sort of minute milliseconds, but this is really the detail that the Google needs to go down and drill down into in order to assess the average capability of the page loading time. The speed index is how quickly are complete elements visibly populated. First CPU idle is the site, has the site loaded enough to handle the user's first input? So any interaction on the site might be clicking a link, filling in a form field, or could be anything really. That's the time that Google is assessing there. Generally speaking, visible elements of the web page will be loaded prior to interactive elements of the page. And then time to interactivity is when everything is loaded in device memory. So when Google's satisfied that it's based on the server request, it's taken all of the available information, all of the content, all of the code, and presented it into the client browser. That's the end user's browser.
So that's the 3 second rule, right, Ben?
Sorry, what was that?
You want the time to interactive would be under 3 seconds.
Well, ideally, yes. And 3 seconds is really the target. I think that's what we'd be aiming for. As I said, it's challenging because different pages load at different times. But if you've got if you've got important pillar pages of your website, I would certainly be focusing on those to improve the speed performance on wherever your key landing pages are, wherever historically you gain the most traffic. Definitely assess those first. And then the final item here, max potential first input delay, and that sounds very technical, but really basically what it means is any delay or lag that the user experiences. It records it because it's putting together a picture of how well websites are working across the internet, but it's not recorded as something that affects page speed because it's kind of out of the webmaster's hands really in terms of what the connectivity that a user enjoys simply out of our hands as far as how much control we can have over it.
Can you give us an example of that, please, Ben?
Okay, we'll just go back. So
The point at which they interact. So is that typing your details into a widget or something?
Yes. So let's say the page is fully loaded. We've gone through everything up until this point. Someone goes to actually type in something in a form field, and you'll see it yourself sometimes. You'll start to type something and you go, hey, nothing's happening. What's going on here? And then suddenly you give it a couple of seconds and the text starts to appear. That's lag. That's kind of latency. So that's the latency that the browser is measuring. And that is the sort of dynamic connection speed between interactions on the site. But as we said, it's an afterthought for Google, really. I'm sure the data they're collecting there is helping the internet service providers, but they won't knock you down on that. They will knock you down, though, however, if you have elements from a coding point of view or from a scripting point of view that are unoptimized, and we'll fire through that shortly as well. So, in a bit of a summary here before we wrap up with a bit more science, how to improve your performance and what to focus on. So as we've established, we can only really have command over our web services, and that's to say our hosting company. Lots and lots of clients we know, and almost everyone is looking to obviously reduce the cost of their web services, make it cost effective. But sometimes, frankly, you get what you pay for, and you should be leaning on your hosts all the time for better performance. And that has an implicit effect on server response time. If you're on a shared server with lots of noisy neighbors and lots of busy websites that are going on, sites going up and down all the time, then unfortunately your speed is likely to be compromised. The bandwidth will be throttled, and of course not everyone can enjoy a dedicated server. Can cost a lot of money as well. So it's really a case of seeking out the best suppliers, the best web service managers, the best people that are going to make sure that what happens in the back end server side is as fast and as efficient as possible. And that includes how well you maintain your website. You need to make sure that, like a good car, it needs an MOT every so often, every month, every 3 months. You need to make sure that you're updating your website, refreshing the code, making sure there's no vulnerability, making sure there's no compatibility problems. You certainly need to be monitoring your website continually, the uptime, downtime, performance of your website will can lead to lots of interesting conversations with your server team. But that's very important to see how well the website is performing. And
well, I think there's a tendency amongst clients to think that maintenance is about ensuring there's no hacking and no downtime. But actually, it's as much to do with maintaining speed and responsiveness of the website as well.
Yes, and security is obviously the first issue, but we all know that lots and lots of companies we deal with, it's entirely natural. Launch a website and they're already thinking about the next one, because these websites can sit in development for a long time before you get around to doing it. Very often companies are left at sea as well, with very little in the way of aftercare or post-launch support performance review. So yes, efficiency of your code, really important. If nothing else, it's going to lead you on to make assessments about how quickly you need to develop new websites as well. And that's, time waits for no one. It's basically
That's an important point, Ben. I think many clients come to us and say, I'm very happy with my website. The guy, the developer built it very quickly. It looks very good. But then as soon as the website the work or the build was finished, then there was no interaction with the builder. He didn't want to deal with my website at all. And we believe really in terms of performance and speed that the maintenance and monitoring the website after the build is maybe even more important than the way that the website looks. It could look amazing, but it would be very slow. No one would visit it. And that's in terms of performance, but also in terms of SEO. We see many clients that forgot and missed a lot of basic SEO ideas on their now website build because the developer was only focused on the visuals rather than the back end.
It's quite surprising to us, but then maybe it's the position we enjoy, I think, as a marketing company. We see it really from the end of what kind of a website does the company need longer term. How does it serve their sales effort? How does it serve, so we've built hundreds of websites over the years, but we're also, got this perspective where we understand that most of the work you do comes after the launch of a website, or at least on a par, at least half and half. So.
Yeah, most of the time, building and launching is the beginning, not the end.
Yeah, indeed.
Otherwise, it just sits there and nobody visits it.
Yes, that's right. So web build and programming improvements are obviously the other thing within our canon as far as being able to make improvements and affect the performance of our website. I'm going to unpack that a little bit now before we get quickly onto the Q&A. So I'll try not to labour on this too much and make sure it's easily digestible for you. But these are important things to think about. If you don't know enough about them already, then it's worth just doing a bit of research into it to aid and support your discussions with your developers. Practical performance tactics, what to discuss. Now, it's important as well that your developers are receptive to these conversations because these are exactly the kind of things you should be holding their toes over the fire about because it's important stuff and it's what you pay for at the end of the day. So web build and programming improvements. Better code, minification, script compression. Now, I could go on a long time about any one of those things, but the basic point is, search engines, servers, they don't care whether your code is, humanized and has lots of nice formatting and paragraphs and things like that. They just want it to read in terms of a string of code. So that's what minification does for you. There's tools out there that enable you to do it. You can do it website, you can do it server side. It will basically compress the script and the code in order that it's more quickly and easily read by the search engine, by the web client, I should say, and therefore improve your speed. Combine files to reduce HTTP requests. So HTTP requests, server requests, they are requests that the your web client is making to the server in order to retrieve script and retrieve code and files for your website. And in order to sort of mitigate any delay and lag in that process, you can combine these files. Again, there are tools in order to do that so that your script is served more quickly and efficiently to the web client or the end user's browser. Lazy loading scripts, high-res images, etc. Lazy loading images. As it suggests, this ensures that the most priority content, priority code and functions are served quickest and ahead of everything else. So in marketing terms, we talk about above the fold and under the folds. It's good old term relating to, I believe, press stands where papers were folded in half, and it's what you see first. It's the first impression, basically. So this ensures that everything is loaded on screen for your user as quickly as possible, but prioritizes that which is above the fold. Everything else comes later, and therefore Google's assessment of your web page, if it's starting to see readable elements and interactive elements and elements that it can recognize as use to the user, of interest to the user, it will assess your website and favorably. CDN, content delivery networks and content optimization. So a content delivery network is, just as it suggests, it's serving content from across a network of different locations, and lots of websites will employ this, especially image-heavy websites, e-commerce websites, will employ this function really, so that your images, etc., will be served from the nearest server location, the nearest location on the network, and therefore reduce speed time. It will also ensure that your server itself is not carrying a heavy load from managing and sifting and sorting and serving these files up. So that's how a content delivery network works broadly. I mean, we understand it in the way that we might embed a video on the page. YouTube, etc. they are effectively the content delivery network, and we are calling on an embedded video from YouTube to serve up on our page, thereby releasing the performance load on our own server. So it's a way to share the load, I guess, is the way to express it best. And so that, that relates to videos, but also relates to images, where lots of clients who don't really know how to use their website probably they'll upload huge images, straight off the camera, go straight onto WordPress, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 megabyte images, massive things that only ever get used in a tiny region of the page. So, and that's obviously increasing not only the overhead on your server in terms of the space for these files, but they load really slowly, obviously, if at all, so you need functions. You need to either have someone who knows what they're doing to optimize your images before you upload them to the website. That's to say, you compress them and you make them fit for purpose. Even big full screen background images can be taken down to quite a small file size through a process of compression. So you don't compromise the resolution, or you take it as far as you possibly can to the point of legibility, but you reduce the file size significantly. And there are also tools as well as part of your web package that will compress
I think it's true to say image compression is probably the first thing that most people think of when they think of website speed. In a way, it's the easiest thing to do as well, isn't it? Because we're always doing it for PDFs that we want to email, for images that we want to put on Facebook or LinkedIn. We're always trying to reduce the size of it. And so very often when I'm talking to website owners, they'll be saying, it's slow, can we compress the images and make them load faster? Yeah. And it's the first thing that people think of. But as you can see, it's just one of a list of things that you could and should be doing, really.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy win for most people if they've got someone who knows their way around image editing software, and if they're really concerned about page speed, they can do it for themselves quite quickly. And caching policies are quite complex. I'll run through it quickly. I think most of us understand or have heard the term browser caching, where your browser, your internet will serve elements of the web page, images and content, save that for the next time you visit, so you get a website much quicker. Now that's your internet browser doing some helpful work for you, but it doesn't really help webmasters or Google to assess how quickly that website is loading, and that's all happens at the user end. But there's server-side caching as well, where you can set up tools, either server-side or again on the web, to manage what parts of your web page are cached. Usually, often less dynamic parts of the website that remain fixed, headers, footers, different elements of the website that, if they're cached, they can be served much more quickly than if they are having to be perpetually, redrawn on the page. So that's caching in a short way. There's lots in and around caching. It's also a very effective tool to boost the speed of a website. And we talked quickly previously about mobile alternative websites. Google produced AMP, which is accelerated mobile pages. Effectively serves a variation, an alternative of your website that's much quicker than your normal sort of heavy code loaded website. The downside is that Google is effectively hijacking all of your URLs, so it has limited. Google does favour AMP websites, but it does complicate the issue in terms of SEO, where you will try to optimise. Certainly for mobile users, the custom web addresses of your website. Gil, can you add anything to that on accelerated pages versus a responsive website?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of us, when we search on our mobile, see these pages. They normally have a little lightning icon next to the search results when you search on your mobile device. As Ben said, it's an alternative version of your mobile site that clears almost all of the design and the code and the information, except your content and pictures, to serve this website or this version of your website as quick as possible. One thing that many developers do is they create this version of mobile alternatives. However, they make sure that the links in these pages don't link to other mobile alternative pages, but link to your actual website. So a user would initially go into your fast kind of alternatives version, but then if they go and click on any link, then they'll see your properly designed and quality and high quality mobile page. So I do think it's good if you speak to your developer, or if you can do yourself to create a version of your website with AMP, but also then divert people to your original website afterwards.
Okay. Well, thank you, guys. Please do give us your questions. I think we have a few already, don't we, Gil? You're managing the Q&A box. But if you have a question you'd like to ask us, then please do ask it now. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen.
Yes, thanks, Mark. Yeah, we're happy to answer any of the questions you may have. If you want to stay on the line afterwards, we'll be happy to chat furthermore. One of the questions that we've had is it possible, and maybe Ben can answer this, is it possible to increase your speed of your website without the help of a developer?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we talked about before, images is a quick one. Certainly, it won't take you long to find some information about how to optimize images for your website. We're talking about how we can crop the images to the correct size for use, and we're talking about how we can press the images in terms of their resolution to limit the file size overall. And you can take that very far, and you'll find that will really short of using a content delivery network, which isn't for everyone, who might only have, say, 50 or 100 images on a website. Optimizing your images is a big one. There's plenty of open source image editors out there on the internet that you can use to help you with that. And I would suggest that, especially if you manage a lot of your own content, that's a big one to learn how to do. Again, host any other sort of rich content, such as it could be PDFs, it could be videos, anything like that. Anything you can ship off to other content delivery networks to reduce the load on your website. So if it's an embedded video from YouTube, if it's a PDF hosted from a different location, Google Drive or Dropbox, these are all resources with huge performing, well-performing servers. And the downside, obviously, to that is that you have to maintain the integrity of the links that you use to those bits of content, rather than, but effectively you're not serving that content from your own server, and that will all really help. As I said before, lean on your service provider, your web service provider, your hosting company. Swing off a few pertinent support tickets. Make sure that they're delivering on what they promised when you signed your agreement with them. Review that. Do your own assessment, as we've shown you today. Do an exercise on the various elements of which pages you want to be optimized better for speed, and take that assessment. And there'll I'm sure be some things in there that you can manage through yourself. But often you do. One does need support. I mean, this webinar serves in itself as a.
I think it's I think it's good practice for everybody to have a go. It doesn't matter if you're a web developer or a marketing manager. I probably speak more for the marketing manager than the web developer, but you need to have tried these things in order to understand what the web developer that works for you is doing. If you haven't tried it, you don't know what they're doing and how difficult it is and how long it should take them and how much success you should expect. So they're not really that difficult. I would give it a go. You're not going to be doing it for the rest of your life, maybe. You can get other people to do it for you. It rather depends on how important SEO is to you as part of your marketing plan. But for most companies, I think it's pretty high up on the list.
Yeah, more and more people are taking their destiny into their own hands, and that's important. Entrepreneurs especially, we come across all the time, and one that have a close hand on the tiller when it comes to managing their web stuff. It's really important. I think the main thing is just to make sure you have the right level of testing and assessment in place. Make sure you've got the redundancy there so you don't break your website if you're going to try things out. Caching is something that you can do for yourself quite, with some success. There's lots of plugins. If you're familiar with using WordPress, you can install various well-known plugins to improve caching on your website. They'll have settings that will just work straight out of the box for you. Just make sure you take a backup of your website before you do anything, but you can try those things out as well.
Yeah, best to cover yourself.
Specifically, kind of to that point, Ben, we've got another question. One of the attendees asked, they said they host their website on Wix and they're constantly battling with load time, and they just did a test. Thanks for doing that. And they scored 11, I presume, for performance. And this is after just a rebuild that they've done to improve things. So what can they do to improve their website speed? And I think they mentioned one of the biggest issue they had is the third-party code on their results.
Yes. That's sorry to hear. I mean, it's not unusual to get low scores in audits. So again, do test across the board, but it does sound like we do come across it with these kind of all-in-one web builders, and Wix comes as part of that. I know some people who get on very well with it, and it's certainly great for people starting out. But you are kind of you're tied into the ecosystem, so the capability of gaining a better command over those things is more difficult because you're relying on these systems to perform for you. Third-party code, obviously we'd have to look into it, but it sounds to me like it could be any number of issues from some embedded content, or could even be script that's been included from sources such as Google itself that could be slowing things down slightly. That may be partly to do with how that script's embedded on the page that's slowing the page down, or so I think any of these things that you find, return to your developer, lean on Wix when it comes to speed. I mean, these or any of these kind of do-it-yourself web builder style platforms, you've got to unfortunately lean on them to get the best support possible, and raise those support tickets, whinge. Nothing ever got done for anyone who didn't ask. So
it's exactly the same as any other negotiation, really, with any other supplier. If you don't ask for it, you don't get it. And the harder you ask for it, the more likely you are to get it.
Yes, yeah. And of course, if you want a second opinion, seek it out. We'll look at your assessment and give you the best of our advice. But I do encourage anyone who's taking on that speed assessment to share that with either your own developer or send it through to us so we can give you some more detailed advice. Like I said, it's a big area, and without some detailed insight, it's hard to diagnose different problems here and now. But we'll try.
Okay, a couple more questions. I think we'll only pick two more. One of them is, so how much speed affects SEO comparing to other SEO consideration we covered in the last few webinars? So we obviously spoken about keywords. We've spoken about approval rates and backlinks. So maybe I can answer, if that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So that's the gold question, really. If we knew, or if anyone knew what Google's after, we would be able to sit in a penthouse in Miami and drink pina coladas. Now, no one knows except the people working for Google what's the exact calculation of what's more important and what's less important in terms of SEO. But what we do know is that Google puts a massive emphasis on speed and performance in SEO. And one of Google's biggest tools that helps websites, website developers or people like you, is Google Search Console. And I highly advise to install it on your website. And even in Search Console, in recent, I guess in the last couple of months, Google introduced an automatic speed test that runs through your pages automatically and checks the speeds of your pages. And bear in mind, Search Console is only about SEO. So if Google chose to include that there, they see that it's a massive, there's massive importance for that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. Yeah, as you pointed out, Gil, that the emphasis is growing on on the importance of speed. And if you think about it, it's logical. Technology is one of the things that moves quickest. We can barely keep up, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow. And I think I alluded to it before. How does Google separate one website from another? I mean, very often we're dealing with websites that need a great deal of care and attention, but there's lots of well-optimized websites out there that perform well. So where's the difference being made? And speed is it. I mean, the landscape will look very different in 6 months to now, especially under the current circumstances, of course, where demands on technology are becoming even greater. So it's one to look out for. It's certainly one to put in the mix. I mean, I don't know how you feel, Mark, but I certainly, in respect to this series of webinars and the pillars of SEO, I alluded to it earlier, but we've got 3 key things here, and I would say they're all, in terms of from a marketing perspective, they're all equal. I mean, how Google assesses it is one thing, but how we assess it as marketers as far as what people should be doing for their websites.
Yeah, well, I'm inclined to say that content is the most important part of it, but I think the world has moved on, and like you said, this was introduced in 2018, wasn't it? And so there's a payoff between content and speed, and sometimes you just have to make some kind of compromise along the way. Maybe it's straightforward. You just start another page, another area on the website, so that you spread that content over more pages. But it's become more and more important, and particularly now in the lockdown.
Yeah.
Okay, and one more question. Ben perhaps can answer that regarding someone's hosting service. What can they, so obviously they'll do the analysis and they're going to check the results. What information they can then pass along to their hosting service to ask for improvement?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm bound to say at this point that I would seek out a web service manager or provider. They usually come in the form of your agency or developer. But the reason I say that is because they've got the know-how. They deal with these suppliers all the time. They know exactly what to look for. They've probably gone through a few themselves before they've landed on the one that they're happy with. So I think, certainly for sites of a certain size, I would ensure that the web managed services that I have in place accommodate my full set of requirements, and as we've alluded to before, that's maintenance, monitoring, hosting is part of it, and as I said, the monitoring is key, and ensure that you get a report back from your web service provider. If you're hosting a smaller website and yourself at cost, and it's not performing the way you expect it to, as we've talked about before, there's various, if you're not aware of the features of your hosting package already, there's various things you can request to see if they come part of it. Obviously, in recent times, one is SSL certificates. That's an important part of Google's approval for your website. Often comes packaged with your hosting service. Another one relating more to speed is there's a server-side caching service called Lightspeed Cache, which you can install a plugin on your site, or ask your developer to do so to employ sort of out-of-the-box caching service, and that's something your service should be providing for you as well. But in terms of the technical results and the technical efficiency of your website, what we're really looking at is server request time to the server. Now, the server really is going to perform as well as the package that you employ. There'll be variations in that. You'll be able to monitor in the control panel of your service area bandwidth, speeds, certainly uptime monitoring. These are all sort of conditions on a daily basis of your server status and integrity. But more importantly, therefore, than just the hosting capability, which will fluctuate somewhat, keep an eye on it so that you ensure that you're getting the best service you can, and chop around regularly, I would say. But more importantly is how well optimized is your code, and we've talked about it, how well structured is the code on your website that's making those server requests that ultimately lead to the page load time of your website. It really comes down to how well optimized and how well built, how well structured that code is, and if it can be improved upon.
Good. Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that covers it all for now. Well, it doesn't cover it all at all, actually, because there's a lot more to say, and we could do 5 webinars just on this subject today. But we've had to keep it within the hour. So thank you very much for listening. Our next webinar is on May the 7th, when we'll be doing the first in our series on strategic social media. Social media is very interesting because we all use it, but it's perceived by many to be just a waste of time, and a flippant waste of time at that. Actually, it doesn't have to be. So join us on May the 7th to find out how to make it useful and how to integrate it into your SEO. You've been listening to Ben, Gil, myself. We are part of Marcom. We're a strategic agency. We work mainly digitally, where we have deep specialisms in SEO, as I hope you've been able to understand today and in our previous webinars. But we also build websites. We also do social media. We also spend a lot of time on content, video, advertising. We put together e-commerce, and we run email campaigns. We also work offline in all the areas in the blue side of that roundel you can see in front of you. There's still work going on, believe it or not. We still produce brochures where people want them. There's what?
Busier than ever.
Yeah, well, we are actually. I don't know quite why, but it's happening. And but if you've enjoyed and learned a lot today, we're very happy. And if you'd like to meet us, or virtually, I should say, call me on that phone number there, or email us info@marcom.net, and visit our website at mar-com.net. Thank you very much for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.